All right.
Okie doke.
So we can do kind of an introduction.
We should totally do an introduction
Right,
with
exactly.
Latte Art of St. Peter's
Yes.
that no one will ever confuse with the U.S. Capitol.
Exactly.
Right.
Not,
Okay.
Not at all.
Right.
Hello, it's October 8th, 2013. My name is Matt,
I'm Peter.
and this is Catholic Coffee House. So for those of you who have not been with us before, Peter, what is the Catholic Coffee House?
Well, at the moment, it's mostly a fictional construct.
There you go.
But there will be coffee, and there will be conversation. And the last time I checked, we were both Catholic.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
So we've got that covered. So we have Catholics, we have coffee, and we are in some sort of building. And we can invite people to come and also have coffee with us eventually.
All right.
And we will, yes, so Catholic Coffee House. And since we're calling it a Catholic Coffee House, we're going to have to have some ground rules about coffee.
Mm-hmm.
For example, no drip pot. This is fine. I have one with a timer on it that I use to wake me up in the morning, but that's probably the only excuse that and laziness. The only excuse I can think of for drinking coffee from a drip pot. So
Yes.
we'll have to restrict ourselves a little bit. So when we get a chance, we'll have to bring on the Chemex pot. And I don't know. Do you have a French press?
I think that's an investment we need to make.
I went through the French press phase early in my coffee drinking years, or not early in my early in my good coffee drinking years.
Yeah.
So
Let's talk about some of what's going on in the news. We've got a lot of Catholic.
all this stuff going on in the news.
Indeed. We have a lot of Catholic interest right now, it seems like. So,
Oh, good grief. What is the most recent? Well, I guess the thing I was hearing the most about today was actually the preparations for the memorial service for all the refugees who died in boating accidents, was it? In Lampedusa in the Mediterranean. And that it sneaks up on me because it's a name that's very remote from me. It's a place that's very remote from me. And I don't. Have you heard anything else about it? I haven't either.
yeah, no.
That's one of those, I want to go look up more about it because I'm an American. And it's like, look, here's the part of the world I don't know much about. But in fact, Pope Francis has prominently mentioned it in almost every public conversation he's had in the last few weeks. So it's one of those, I guess I need to find out more about it kind of things.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's always the latest interview.
Indeed.
And
so for today, that latest interview is the one that he had with the Italian kind of prominent atheist.
Yeah.
But it was with a prominent atheist, wasn't it?
Yeah, Scaffari is the editor of, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. I should get my buddy James on here. He actually speaks Italian. But the La Repubblica, which is definitely edited from a very the word Republican in European politics generally means someone who emphasizes laicite. They're usually anti-clerical, and that usually also means anti-Catholic. At the very least, it means they have, how can I say, a view of the separation of church and state that makes the ACLU look like fundamentalists.
Yeah. So lots of hubbub about the at least apparently one translation of the interview with Scalafari. And, But
the worst translation would be the one, right, where it appears that Pope Francis bungled the incarnation.
Right.
Which, of course, he didn't. But
the quote that says
was easy to get by.
that Christ became incarnate in the souls of men. Yes. Clearly
Rudolf Bultmann might have said that. Pope Francis, not so much.
Yeah, clearly not a Catholic concept, but fortunately, it seems that is a mistranslation at this point.
Yeah, that was definitely not.
The other point of controversy being the apparently universalist leaning of his understanding of morality and salvation.
Yeah.
The quote, and I don't have it pulled up, but talking about everyone has their vision of good.
Yeah. Good and evil, and we must encourage them to do the good that they see.
Right.
Yeah. Which, I mean, on the one hand, that's obvious enough, right? The trick is that in a certain context, a certain conversation, it starts to sound like what we're saying is that's all we have to ask of anyone ever. Like we should only ask people to do whatever they already think is good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fairly plainly, the history of the world and everything I know about theology says that doesn't work that way.
Right. I mean,
Right?
the Catechism, of course, talks about the primacy of conscience, but it also goes on to say you have to inform that conscience
Right.
in order for that whole principle to work.
Right.
And yeah, and so a lot of bloggers and various armchair bishops and so forth are talking about their
Well-
preference that the Pope would have expounded on this, but
Well, I mean, I would prefer he did.
Yeah.
I mean, flatly, I have a lot of sympathy for, and it's not all scurrilous people who are flinging their aprons over their heads and running for the hills. It's I think there's some legitimate feeling that it's just not the same
Right.
to talk to someone you meet on the bus and to talk to someone who's going to publish it worldwide without say getting someone else to take down a careful transcription for you.
Mhm.
It's just it's challenging to take on that idea of talking out loud in public without a safety net.
yeah.
And I'm not going to tell him don't do it. I mean, last I checked, he's Pope, not me.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's two sides to it. On the one hand, a pope should not feel constrained necessarily by the papal office from having a heart-to-heart conversation with someone for whom
Right.
he is the universal shepherd.
Right.
On the other hand, when that is a conversation that will be published in a possibly even less than honest or less than what
Yeah.
would I say? Less than
well, I don't know.
amiable
yeah.
newspaper, that perhaps you do want to be very clear about the things that you're talking about and the nuances that exist in Catholic thought and things like that.
It's just a tricky balance, and I think I was reading. I can't remember who it. This is something I should look up before I talk about it. But I was reading someone who's doing a good job making I think trying to hit a balance here, saying on the one hand, yeah, I wish he would, ease into it a bit.
Yeah.
Don't kind of let it all hang out there and then talk in a way that people aren't going to be able to fill in the blanks for. There's just so many blanks people have to fill in to grasp this. On the other hand, saying, that it's good that we can have these conversations so long as we know we have blanks to fill in.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, for example, with the conscience thing, it's easy enough to fill in those blanks if you believe in a real unity of the good. If you believe that anyone who actually does something that we can look at and say, this is good, is in fact being drawn into closer contact with the rest of what's going to teach them what's good. So that at some point they're going to have to decide either to go to places that they have not yet foreseen that are good, or they'll have to decide not to do that.
Yeah.
And so that it's not like we've left out the idea that you have to choose. In fact, that's the point he's making in a lot of ways, is we do have to still point out to people they have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
They have to recognize that they do think in terms of good and evil, and they have to choose on the basis of that recognition, because then you actually do have conscience.
Right.
Because a lot of our culture, a lot of kind of a late secularist culture, actually just defangs the idea of conscience altogether. Right? It's like, it's not, well, I think this is good, and you have reasons to think I'm wrong, and we can discuss that because we both want the good. One of us is wrong about it. But that's not so much what happens a lot of times. It's, well, I think this is good, you disagree, but you better be quiet about that, or you're a bad person. Because
Right.
if I think it's good, it can't be discussed, and heaven forfend, we should have a notion that there's evil.
Right.
And that's where Pope Francis is making us think about that again.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, there's some continuity there, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
because Benedict spoke so eloquently of his, what he termed the dictatorship of relativism,
Mm-hmm.
which is exactly that, this idea that conscience is no longer two people disagreeing about what is good, but rather two versions of good that are just as valid as each other.
Right.
And I think that ironically, that's what so many people are rebelling against, and what you're hearing in this interview with the Pope, with Pope Francis, and yet I see no evidence that that's what he meant. It's clear that he's speaking with someone with whom he does have disagreement regarding morality and conscience, and trying to find that common ground. To me, it's just that we're privy to this conversation in a context of journalism and reporting and these things that was not actually present in the conversation that they were having.
Right. And so, I mean, I think there is a legitimate question of how do you do public rhetoric, and is this necessarily more profitable than risky?
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, you've had conversations with people in all states of belief among your friends, I'm sure.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I have as well. I've sat in coffee shops of every species and had conversations with people who devoutly believed things that were dead set against what I believe, or who were completely without confidence that any particular thing at all could command their belief, that there was anything they should say, I have to believe this whether I like it or not because it's really true. It's out there, it's real, and I see it.
Right.
And I mean, when you're having those conversations, every one of them plays out a little differently, and you do have to sometimes leave people with provisional truths that you know are not enough to sustain them all the way.
Mm-hmm.
But you know are the piece they can grasp right now, and if they'll head that direction, they'll get somewhere better.
Right.
And you know, it's like if I'm talking to any number of my Protestant friends, and they're clinging to the idea that the Bible is true, the doggone it, when you pick up the Bible and you read something in it, you are reading the truth that God wants. Well, I don't think that's a full enough understanding of how Scripture works. Otherwise, I wouldn't be Catholic. Okay? But at the same time, I don't want to blow that up for them.
Right.
Because that's a provisional truth, and they're right about a lot of what they're saying.
Right. Yeah.
They're right about it. I mean, it's you know, it is true. And in fact, that's the very first thing that the Catechism says about it is it's true. It doesn't make mistakes. Oh, look at that. That's just what I always believed. But there's something about the way they're holding that truth that has a mistake in it too. And if I went out and said, yes, we believe exactly the same thing about the Bible, in every respect, in public, that would be confusing.
Right.
At the same time, if I say, I don't see any need to tell you right now that you have to immediately change everything you believe about the Bible, well, they might change it in for something worse instead of something better.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a lot of what Pope Francis is doing, is trying to help people change where they are for something better rather than something worse. And that creates awkward moments that sometimes only make sense in the immediate conversation, and if you take them one step outside that, they won't make sense at all.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and then I mean, so there is that question. You know, should the Pope stop having those conversations? I don't think so. I mean, I think that being willing to engage in dialogue with non-traditional, audiences and non-traditional individuals is an important thing. I mean, I think that the amount of goodwill that's generating outside of the kind of Catholic fortress is all in all probably a net gain. The question though is, I mean, what do you do to try and limit the misunderstanding? You know, there's intentional misunderstanding, which you'll get a lot in the media, and then there's unintentional misunderstanding. I think intentional misunderstanding is just kind of a fact of life. You're going to have to be aware of it, and you know you can't do much about it because somebody who wants to twist your words are going to do that. The unintentional misunderstanding is the piece of the puzzle that I think, from a strictly PR perspective, the Pope and the Vatican don't have a handle on right now. And I think it does. I think you're right. It needs to be addressed because, people are coming with an expectation of a certain type of teaching moment coming from this religious public figure, and they're observing an entirely different one. And that is creating problems inside and outside the church. I know I was reading online, a couple positive things about the Pope, but positive for really wrong reasons. Ideas that he's trying to overthrow women's ordination, the bar against women's ordination. Ideas that he's now trying to seek to change the church's understanding on homosexuality. All of these things that they approve of, but are not actually anything of what the Pope has said.
Yeah. Oh, that we should link to the comic that was going around about ordering the anchovy pizza.
Oh yeah. Where Benedict
says he doesn't want anchovies.
Yes. Okay. Link below.
Yeah. He doesn't want anchovies, and the net result is that someone declares that in a startling reversal, that the Pope has outlawed fish for Catholics.
Yes.
Which would of course make Henry VIII very happy, but so.
Would it really though? Was he ever happy?
Oh well, that's a different story. It would have suited his economic agenda.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Henry. Yeah.
Fair
Well,
enough.
you know how he did that. He jinked around with the fasting and feasting rules because he became convinced that it was a sort of a gross economic problem that the balancing the coastal towns versus the interior, because with all of the periods, and back at that day, in the rite that was being practiced up there, it was something like I think it was better than a third of the year was abstinence days where you weren't eating meat, and this was of course great for the fish industry. And that he would he's like, well, yeah, but our mutton is going to waste. So he would rebalance the feast days and abstinence days in order to improve the economy.
Interesting.
So, there is no new thing under the sun.
No.
Oh.
Okay, well, let's kind of move on then. I want to talk coffee for a little bit.
We could talk coffee. So, yeah. So, I'm down to my last 3 batches of green coffee. I roast about half a pound at a time, and that's just I've got a little machine. So someday we'll move up to something a little more aggressive, but not any day soon. But I'm getting ready to put together an order, and actually I was thinking we could just kind of tinker with what kinds of coffee we want to keep around.
Yeah.
Let's see. Getting coffee, and I'm just using Sweet Maria's. There's several vendors you can use. Probably the most common one for people who are just getting started in roasting their own online is Sweet Maria's. Down in Houston, actually, I had 2 or 3 good local shops I used to go to get places. In Oklahoma City, I haven't actually yet found a good place to buy green coffee from. I mean, obviously, you have to import it into Oklahoma anyway.
Right.
But it's usually you could find shops that kind of cater to the crowd. And so far, I really haven't. There must be one, but I haven't found it. So, so let's see. In terms of how you get coffee and what kinds you get, there's. I'm going to go home here. Probably should have planned my navigation a little bit better. There's different things you want to know about it, and probably of interest to us, aside from the basics of home roasting, there's also the question of how you get where you get different kinds from and what you want to get. And one of the great things is that the whole home roasting, small shop roasting coffee has also been tied tightly together with a movement to try to get people from different places of the world more involved with and kind of owning their own production. And so, of course, back when the whole like Seattle coffee shop thing kind of blew out across the country and then became the monolithic monstrosity Starbucks, the key word at the time was fair trade. Right. And fair trade, there's like a dozen, I think it's like 14 different ways that you can have your coffee certified as fair trade. And depending on what that is, that could mean anything from we don't actually hire pirates to harass the people. I'm kidding a little bit. But it could be from very kind of broad, kind of corporate mission statement style standards to very specific, like we only deal with people that actually own their own farms or something like that.
Right. And obviously the idea of fair trade is that there's a lot of corruption and lack of what we would call social justice in the coffee industry, because there's large corporations that maintain these farms and things and have, essentially almost indentured workers working on them and are
Right.
not being paid a fair enough wage for the coffee that they grow.
So-
They have to, and so fair trade is an attempt to try and limit that,
Yeah.
and pay a fair wage so that these farmers can support their families and
Yeah, and bit by bit, that's evolved. There are now, and I don't pretend to be up on all of the different ways people have tried to work out market mechanisms for this, but one way that people are going to this now is even bypassing the larger co-ops, and trying to they'll use various microfinance type plans or things like that, and actually set up particular farmers or small groups of farmers on their own land and buy the production directly from them, and then kind of mix and match those lots at market to get it out into the market. And so that means that when you go on one of these sites, in the early days, you got down to like source specific coffee, and it's like you could buy a Guatemalan coffee or a Costa Rican coffee. No, now you can choose from like a dozen different Guatemalan or Costa Rican coffees. You could choose from, sometimes you can literally choose what farm. Like if I go to African coffees here and I just look at what's Ethiopian.
yeah.
Okay, Ethiopia Busa Bekane, I don't even know what that is. But like if you see Yirgacheffe is actually from a region, and that region is pretty much all its production is owned by 2 or 3 large co-ops. So Yirgacheffe is one of the brands you can get, and it's come from, not brand, it's a description of a bean, but you can get it, and you'll usually know it's come from at least a co-op that's a major Ethiopian concern. But then you can go farther than that. You get down specific camps, which is specific groups that own their own land and live on it and work it. Like here, let's see if we can we'll get a full review of the Ilyu Babur camp in Ethiopia. Now this costs a little more. This is
Yeah.
more expensive than something else, but it's not a lot more expensive. And really, if you're buying your own and roasting your own, for what you would spend doing that, you might as well get something that came from, from people you could go meet.
Right.
I mean, there are trade-offs, but they're good ones. Okay, camp coffee. This review, I'll give just a couple lines of their review, just because it's witty. I know this will be the source of a few jokes, especially since camp coffee to many people means not so tasty coffee, enjoyable because it's hot and you're camping. Well, no, that's not what it is. I've been to the Camp Co-op Mill and still can't explain the name. It just is. So it's a location in the Ilyu district in western Ethiopia and so forth. And he talks about going there because these folks actually send their staff out to go source this stuff directly. And he gives you, cupping scores of stuff. But then you can go, you get stuff that's organic and from a given farm. The point being that for just a little extra work, you actually get better coffee that you know more about. You know more about where it came from, and it's just one of those little tiny things where I don't know.
Makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside.
It makes you
least.
feel warm and fuzzy, and I think it actually does something a little bit better.
Well, yeah,
I think it's
right.
actually a little bit. It's a tiny increment. But if enough people are doing it, it becomes a slightly bigger increment.
Right, and I mean, it is at its core. I mean, yes, you're buying a product, but the choice to buy that product versus a slightly cheaper, easier to obtain product is still that portion of it is still an act of charity.
Yeah, and
right?
I still buy gas station coffee when I'm driving into work in the morning.
Right.
I do, but it's an increment, and it's very hard in a culture that's as connected as ours is to move very radically toward the good, because you're towing so many people with you every time you do, and the inertia is just really hard to overcome. So sometimes I really do think that the more we can encourage each other to all take incremental steps together, the more we can kind of create the right kind of inertia. And I don't want to sit back and say, well, if your coffee has a fair trade stamp on it, you are a pretty good person. Because that would be silly, right? But on the other hand, if you can put in a little time to go make something that you know where it came from, and you made the best decisions you could about where it came from, then share that with some people. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a start toward a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. There you go.
besides which, it's coffee.
Yes.
And you can't grow it in Oklahoma, folks. So you're going to have to import it from somewhere. But
I'm sure you could grow it in Oklahoma. It would just be the purpose. I mean, if you imported the soil and set up kind of, one of those Mars biodome type things.
Yeah, it would take a lot of engineering. Yeah.
It could be done.
My brother has grown small coffee plants in Illinois, but he would be the first to tell you he's not looking to go into production that way.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. We don't have a lot of rainforest or mountains or any kind of the biomes that you would require.
Right. Yeah. You need that right mix of dryness and humidity and shade and wind and cold.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. Well, there you go.
It also makes me happy. I don't know, Ethiopia. This is completely unrelated to anything. I'm just rabbit trailing here. But in studying Coleridge's works, one of the interesting things about Kublai Khan is he somehow manages to conflate a place in Mongolia with a place in Ethiopia in the middle of the poem. And studying that, I had to study out all this history of Abyssinia, which is the old name for Ethiopia. And it's amazing and a little bit sad to think that this country that we usually today think of as, well, what it is, an incredibly impoverished place, was really until the late 19th century not only one of the breadbaskets of the entire continent of Africa, but the place that for centuries, millennia, people had thought was probably the site of the Garden of Eden because the central plain there, the source of headwaters of the Nile, is so amazingly lush, and it makes me happy to see so many, even if it's just coffee beans, to see so many kind of productive things happening there again, because I don't know, there's just some places in the world that you get attached to in your imagination.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so, guys, we're going to be kind of having some coffee talk every time we do this show. And if you've got any questions on roasting or beans or anything else, go ahead and leave them in the comments.
Or answers. Answers are good too.
Or if you're,
I'm not actually a pro at this. I know and listen to people who are pros and ask questions, but I'm a trial and error guy. So.
Yeah. So, and I know there's going to be like that one guy in the comments who's like, you pronounced that place in Ethiopia completely wrong. And sure, let us know.
I've already made at least one mistake just reading off the screen over there. So.
Yeah. So yeah, let us know.